Welcome to the first ever Dadlife podcast. So for the first episode, I thought that I would just give you guys a bit of history so you kind of know what I'm going to be talking about in these future podcasts. So I am 40 years old. I have two daughters. One is 10 and one is 7. I work a full-time job and I play bass in 4 cover bands. I have my kids about half the time, so I'm pretty busy. I'm single at the moment. The girl's mom and I split up about, 3 summers ago. And I've had 2 girlfriends since. I lived with one for about 7 months or so. So I'm hoping that in this podcast I can kind of sort through some things in my head. I can ask you guys for your opinions on how to deal with, my girls fight a lot. We've been struggling with name calling and swearing, and we have them in counseling and just a lot of stuff like that going on. And I thought I'd share you some dating stories. So I think this will be a fun podcast to do. I also have other friends that I was thinking that I could get to come on the podcast, and maybe I could ask them some questions about how they deal with certain things and other parenting styles. So since it's been about 3 years since their mom and I split, actually no, it's been 4 years, because I lived there for a full year after we split. And that was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. So about 6 months after we split, I was living upstairs and I met a girl and we dated for a year and a half, and I ended up moving out of the house with my family into a house with my girlfriend. And looking back, I'm very thankful for her to have helped me get out of the house, but I also think that I should have moved out on my own, because that whole situation, she didn't have kids. It was really hard for her, and which made it really hard for me. And when I first moved out, the girls came over to sleep over the first night, and my oldest wouldn't get out of the car. When she finally did, she came inside and hid in the closet for an hour. They really had a hard time. My first night away, I FaceTimed them to say goodnight, and both of them were crying, "When are you going to come home, Daddy?" And I swear I cried every day for months. I finally got through it, but my girlfriend, since she was having a hard time with it, and she hadn't lived with anybody in a long time, and she was just upset about us being in her space, sharing her stuff, which just made it 10 times harder for me. And I feel like if I moved out on my own, then I could have dealt with it better. Maybe it would have been easier, but yeah, leaving my family like that, I never want to do that again. And I would never wish that for anybody to go through. But looking back now, I know it had to happen. I know that we didn't have a good relationship in the last 2 years. We barely even spoke. So I'm glad that we're out. She's moved on. And I feel like the girls and I are in a good place. We're getting along a lot more now. There was a lot of fighting. I feel like they were just angry at me and their mom for a long time too, like fighting every day, calling us both names, and how her boyfriend could move out and I could, take his place. I keep trying to explain to them that that's not going to happen, but they would love for their parents to be back together. That was another hard thing when I first moved out too, is picking them up and seeing their mom's boyfriend being there, and just seeing like, oh, that's the guy who replaced me. I see this nice little family, and then, I'd go home and just be upset after my girlfriend and I split up. I'd just go home alone, and definitely some tough times. Anyways, that's it for the first episode. If you guys go to anchor.fm/Dadlife podcast, there is a link there where you can submit me an audio question. I would love to hear your questions, and I will take the time to answer them at the end of each podcast if I get any. Visit me on Instagram, Dadlife Podcast, and on Facebook. I'll see you next week.